Before I tell you these, I want you to think about the places where you usually let your guard down. Not the obviously creepy places, not abandoned hospitals or empty roads in horror movies. I mean the places that feel normal because people go there all the time. The woods you hunt in every season. A quiet country house where the neighbors wave when they pass. A spring break rental full of music, beach towels, and people laughing outside the door. That's what makes stories like these stick with you. They don't start somewhere strange. They start somewhere familiar, somewhere you would have gone without thinking twice. So get settled for a while, let the room get quiet, and listen closely, because each of these happened in a place that should have felt safe. And each person telling it remembers the exact moment they realized it wasn't. My name is Mark Ellison. I was 36 when this happened, and I had been hunting the same patch of private land since I was old enough to carry a rifle. It was my uncle's property in southern Missouri. 80 acres of timber, brush, creek beds, and one old hay field that hadn't been used in years. The land sat off a 2-lane road about 15 minutes outside town, and once you got past the gate, there was nothing but woods and quiet. Nobody hunted it, except family. That was the rule. My uncle was strict about it because we'd had problems with trespassers before. Guys would cut through fences, set up tree stands without permission, leave beer cans in the creek, that kind of thing. But it had never been anything serious. At least, not until that morning. I got there a little after 5. It was still completely dark, the kind of cold November morning where your breath hangs in front of your face, and every sound carries too far. I parked near the old hay field, shut off my headlights, and sat there for a minute like I always did. I liked that part of hunting almost as much as the hunt itself. That quiet time before sunrise. No phone calls, no traffic, no people, just the heater ticking softly. After I turned the truck off in the woods waiting beyond the field, I grabbed my pack, rifle, coffee, and headlamp, then started down the trail. My ground blind was about half a mile in, tucked near a creek where deer moved through before first light. I had used that spot for years. I knew every dip in the path, every stump, every branch that brushed my shoulder if I stepped too far left. That was why I noticed the boot prints immediately. My headlamp caught them in the mud about 20 feet before the blind. Large boots. Fresh. Bigger than mine. They came from the opposite direction, crossed right in front of my blind, circled it once, then stopped directly under the side window. At first I was irritated more than scared. I figured some idiot had cut through the fence and found my spot. Maybe he'd been scouting. Maybe he'd been using my blind when I wasn't there. Then I saw the window flap. It was open. I never left it open. I stood there with my rifle angled down, staring at it. There are little things you remember clearly when something feels wrong. I remember the sound of my own breathing inside my face covering. I remember a drop of water falling from a branch and hitting the leaves near my boot. I remember thinking the woods suddenly felt too still. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. I waited. No movement, no answer, no footsteps leaving. I moved closer and swept my headlamp across the outside of the blind. That was when I saw the words. They had been written in mud across the fabric. "I know your spot." 4 words, dragged by a finger in crooked letters. I actually laughed once, but not because it was funny. It was that nervous kind of laugh that comes out when your brain doesn't know what else to do. I said, "Real cute." My voice sounded weak in the woods. I unzipped the blind. Inside, my folding chair had been turned around. Not bumped, not shifted. Turned completely around so it faced the back wall instead of the shooting window. On the seat was a single shotgun shell. I don't hunt with a shotgun. Nobody in my family had used a shotgun on that property in years. I picked it up with 2 fingers and looked at the brass. It was dirty, like it had been carried loose in someone's pocket for a long time. Then I smelled cigarettes. Not fresh smoke. Old smoke. Stale and trapped inside the blind, like someone had been sitting in there with the zipper closed. I should have left. I know that now. Standing there in the dark, I started doing what people always do when they don't want to admit they're scared. I explained it away. Maybe it was a trespasser trying to scare me off. Maybe it was some local kid. Maybe one of my cousins thought this was hilarious. I turned the chair back around. I put the shotgun shell in my pack. I wiped the mud off the outside as best I could with a rag. Then I zipped myself inside the blind and sat down. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. The sky slowly turned gray. The trees started separating from the dark. Birds began calling from high branches. Somewhere behind me, the creek moved over rocks with that low, steady sound that usually calmed me down. But I couldn't relax. Every few seconds, I looked over my shoulder at the back wall of the blind. Then I heard a deer bleat. It came from my left. Close. Maybe 30 yards. I sat up, raised my rifle slightly, and looked through the side window. Nothing. The bleat came again. This time it was behind me. I froze. It sounded too clean, too exact. If you've hunted long enough, you know the difference between a real deer and somebody using a call. This was a call. A few seconds passed. Then a man whispered from the other side of the blind. "Got you looking." I didn't breathe. The voice was close enough that I could hear air leave his mouth after he said it. I turned my head slowly toward the back wall. There was no window on that side, just fabric. Then something pressed against it from outside. A hand. The shape of the fingers pushed the fabric inward, stretching it toward me. The hand slid down once, slow and deliberate, like whoever was out there wanted me to see every finger. I grabbed my rifle and yelled, "Get away from me." The hand disappeared. Nothing happened for maybe 5 seconds. Then I heard running. But not away. Around. Boots crashed through leaves in a wide circle around the blind. I spun toward the side window and caught a dark shape moving between the trees. Then I heard another sound on my right. A second person. That changed everything. One trespasser was bad. 2 people circling me in the woods before sunrise meant this wasn't just some guy messing around. I grabbed my pack, unzipped the blind, and ran. I didn't go toward the trail I came in on. That felt too obvious. I went straight toward the creek because I knew if I crossed it and climbed the opposite bank, I could cut through the timber and reach an old logging road that looped back toward the hayfield. The ground was slick. I slipped twice before I reached the water. Behind me, I heard someone shout something I couldn't make out. Then laughter. Short and breathless. I splashed through the creek, soaked both boots, and scrambled up the muddy bank on the other side. Thorns tore at my pants. My rifle sling kept catching on branches. I kept going. The worst part was that they weren't sprinting after me. They were following, but not panicked. Like they knew the woods well enough to take their time. I stopped behind a thick cedar and tried to listen. My phone had no service. I knew it wouldn't, but I checked anyway. No bars. Then the screen lit up. A text came through from an unknown number. "Wrong way, Mark." My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. They knew my name. I stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. There was no service, but the text had come through. That meant either it had been delayed, or I had one tiny pocket of signal exactly where I was standing. Either way, they had my number. I looked around the tree. The woods behind me were empty. Then, I saw orange fabric hanging from a branch about 20 yards away. My hunting vest. The one I had left in my truck. I stared at it for a second, not understanding. Then my truck horn sounded from the direction of the field. One long blast. Then another. They had been in my truck. I ran harder than I ever had in my life. By the time I reached the edge of the timber near the hayfield, I was shaking so badly, I had to crouch behind brush just to keep from falling. My truck was there. Both doors open. The dome light on. My glove box had been dumped onto the floor. Papers were scattered across the seat. My orange vest was gone, obviously, and my driver's side door hung open like someone had just stepped away from it. Behind my truck was a white pickup. No plates. No markings. Blocking me in. A man stood beside my truck wearing a camouflage jacket and an orange cap pulled low. I couldn't see his face. He was looking toward the tree line like he knew I was close. Another man stood closer to the fence. He had something in his hand. My keys. I must have dropped them while running. I slowly backed into the woods again. That was when an old trail camera flashed from a tree at the edge of the field. The man by my truck turned toward the camera. Then toward me. He hadn't seen me directly, but he saw the flash and he knew what it meant. I didn't wait. I ran parallel to the field, cutting toward the main road instead of trying for my truck. It was farther, but at least it was away from them. For the next 40 minutes, I moved through woods, ditches, and overgrown pasture like I was being hunted. Because I was. At one point, I heard the white pickup start. Its engine moved slowly along the fence line, stopping every so often. I stayed low in the grass until it passed. Another text came through. "You are making this harder." I almost threw the phone away, but I didn't. It was my only chance if I got service. By the time I reached the nearest house, I could barely talk. An older couple lived there. I came up their driveway covered in mud, carrying a rifle, hands raised because I didn't want them to think I was a threat. The man inside opened the door with a pistol in his hand. I don't blame him. All I could say was, "Please call the police. Someone's after me." Deputies got to my uncle's property about 20 minutes later. The white pickup was gone. My truck was still there, but the tires had been and the battery cables cut. Inside the truck, my registration was missing. So was an old insurance card with my home address on it. Inside the blind, deputies found something I hadn't seen earlier. A folded sheet of paper tucked under the chair. It was a hand-drawn map of the property. The field. The creek. The logging road. My blind. The trail I had always used. At the bottom, someone had written, "He comes alone." Police never found the men. The trail camera got one photo of the guy in the orange cap, but his face was turned away. The second man was only a dark blur near the fence. My uncle put up new gates, new cameras, and no trespassing signs all over the property. We stopped hunting there for the rest of the season. I haven't gone back alone since. People always ask what scared me the most. The hand on the blind. The text message. The truck being blocked in. But it was none of those. It was the map. Because the map meant they hadn't just found me that morning. They had watched me before. They knew where I parked. They knew what path I used. They knew I came in before sunrise. And they knew I came alone. That is what stays with me. Not that strangers were in the woods, but that they had been waiting for the right morning to let me know. Take a second with that one. Because the next story doesn't start with a rifle, a hunting blind, or anyone running through the trees. It starts in a quiet country house, the kind of place where people say things like, "Nobody locks their doors out here." Which sounds peaceful until you realize someone may have been counting on that. My name is Rebecca Lane. I was 29 when this happened, and I was house sitting for my grandparents while they visited my aunt in Tennessee. Their house sat about 15 minutes outside town in rural Kentucky. It was surrounded by fields on 3 sides, with a barn behind it, and a narrow strip of woods past the pasture fence. I had stayed there plenty of times growing up, so I wasn't nervous. The place always felt safe to me. Too safe, maybe. My grandfather had that old, country kind of confidence where he believed bad things happened somewhere else. He locked the doors at night, but not because he was worried, more out of habit. He kept a shotgun in the bedroom closet, fed the dogs at 5 every evening, and left the porch light on until he went to bed. My grandmother was the careful one. Before they left, she gave me the usual instructions. Feed the dogs. Bring in the mail. Don't leave the barn door open. Don't forget the side door sticks unless you pull it hard. Then she said something that seemed random at the time. If the dogs start acting strange, don't ignore it. I laughed and told her I wouldn't. The first night was normal. I made dinner, watched TV, fed the dogs, and fell asleep on the couch around midnight. The only thing I noticed was how quiet it got after the heater clicked off. Country quiet is different. It isn't silent, exactly. There are crickets, wind, dogs barking far away, sometimes a car on the gravel road. But inside the house, every little sound feels bigger. The second night was when things started. Around 10:30 I noticed the porch light was off. My grandfather had a bright motion light above the front porch. It came on if anything crossed the yard. Deer, cats, the dogs, even wind sometimes if the hanging plants moved enough. But now the porch was completely dark. I flipped the switch by the door. Nothing. I figured the bulb had burned out. Then 20 minutes later, the light came on by itself. Just for 5 seconds. Long enough to light up the front yard. Then it went out again. I stood behind the curtains, looking through the narrow gap. The gravel driveway was empty. The dogs were quiet. That bothered me. They barked at everything. Trucks, birds, the neighbor's tractor. If the light had come on because something moved, they should have reacted. I checked the back door, locked. Front door, locked. Side door, locked. Then I went to the kitchen and looked out toward the barn. That was when I saw a tiny red light blink in the hayloft. Once. Then again. It was small but clear. Like the recording light on a camera. I leaned closer to the window. The barn was dark, except for that blink. I told myself it was probably some reflection. Maybe the freezer light from the mudroom catching something metal. Maybe a tool hanging in the loft. But the kitchen lights were off. The house behind me was dark. There was nothing to reflect. I called my grandfather. No answer. I called my dad next. While the phone rang, something moved near the barn door. A man stepped out. He wore jeans, a dark hoodie, and a baseball cap. He didn't run or duck away. He walked calmly across the yard toward the side of the house. I dropped below the window. My dad answered, and I whispered, "Someone is outside." His voice changed instantly. He told me to lock myself in the bedroom and call 911. I crawled out of the kitchen and moved down the hallway, staying low even though I knew that probably didn't matter. The house had 3 outside doors. Front door. Back door. Side door. The side door was the one nearest the driveway and barn. It opened into the mudroom where my grandfather kept boots, tools, dog food, and old coats. I checked the front door again. Locked. Then the back. Locked. Then I checked the side door. The deadbolt was turned. Unlocked. I stared at it. I knew I had locked it earlier. I remembered pulling it shut until it stuck, just like my grandmother warned me, then turning the lock. I reached forward, twisted the deadbolt back into place, and backed away. Outside, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Not loud. Almost polite. I froze in the mudroom. Then a man's voice called through the door. "Rebecca, your grandpa said I could check the water line." I stopped breathing. He knew my name. I had not posted anything online. My grandparents didn't use social media. Nobody, except my parents and my aunt, knew I was staying there. I didn't answer. The man knocked again. "Rebecca?" He said it like he knew me. Like we had spoken before. I ran to the hallway bathroom, locked the door, and called 911. The dispatcher asked for the address, and I whispered it as quietly as I could. She told me deputies were on the way, but I knew response time would be bad. Out there, emergency lights still had to cover long roads with no shortcuts. While I was on the phone, I heard the side door handle turn. Slowly. Then stop. Then turn again. The dispatcher told me to stay where I was and stay quiet. I sat in the bathtub with my knees pulled to my chest, phone pressed against my ear, trying not to breathe too loudly. For about a minute I heard nothing. Then the floor vent beside the bathroom sink made a tiny metallic sound. Click. I looked down. The vent cover shifted. Just a little. One screw lifted out of place. I stared at it, unable to move. The cover shifted again. Then I saw fingers. Dirty fingers pushed up through the gap. Someone was under the house. My grandparents' home had a crawlspace beneath almost every room. There was an access door outside near the back steps, but it was supposed to be latched and padlocked. The man at the side door wasn't trying to break in. He had already been under me. I screamed into the phone. The dispatcher told me to get out of the bathroom if I could do it safely. The vent cover lifted higher. A hand came through, palm flat against the tile, feeling around. I grabbed the only thing I could reach, a ceramic soap dish from the edge of the tub, and threw it as hard as I could. It hit the vent with a crack. The hand vanished. Then something slammed beneath the floor. Hard. The bathroom shook. I unlocked the door and ran to my grandparents' bedroom. I remembered my grandfather kept a shotgun in a locked case in the closet, but I didn't know the combination. So I shoved the dresser in front of the bedroom door, pushed a chair under the handle, and crawled into the far corner. For the next 10 minutes, the house made sounds I still hear in my head. Scraping beneath the floor. A thump under the bed. Metal dragging somewhere under the hallway. Then the dogs outside started barking. Really barking. Not their usual bored country barking. This was frantic. The barking moved from the back of the house, toward the barn. Then suddenly stopped. That silence was worse than the noise. I whispered to the dispatcher. The dogs stopped. She told me deputies were close. Then I heard something from the closet. A soft tapping. Not inside the room. Under it. Tap. 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 The floorboards in the closet creaked upward slightly, like pressure was being applied from below. I realized there must have been some access gap beneath the bedroom closet too. Maybe for plumbing. Maybe old ductwork. I didn't know. The tapping stopped. Then my phone buzzed while I was still on the call. A text message appeared from an unknown number. "Open the door before they get here." I made a sound I didn't recognize. The dispatcher asked what happened, and I told her someone had texted me. She told me not to respond. The bedroom door handle moved. Not violently. Just a gentle turn. Then a man's voice came from the hallway. "Rebecca, I'm not going to hurt you." That was the first time I cried. Not because I believed him. Because he sounded calm. He sounded like a man trying not to scare a child. That calmness made it feel worse than yelling would have. Red and blue lights finally flashed through the bedroom curtains. The voice in the hallway stopped. Then I heard running. Not out the front door. Under the house. A heavy scramble beneath the floor, moving fast toward the back. The deputies found the crawlspace door open. Inside, they found a blanket, a flashlight, 2 water bottles, a screwdriver, a cheap prepaid phone, and a small wireless camera pointed up through a gap near the living room vent. The camera had a clear view of the couch, where I had slept the night before. In the barn loft, they found another camera taped to a beam, aimed toward the house. That red blinking light I saw had been real. The side door lock had been manipulated from underneath using a long piece of wire pushed up near the doorframe. The deputy said whoever did it had probably tested it more than once. Then my grandfather admitted something that made everything worse. A week before I stayed there, he noticed feed bags moved around in the barn. He thought raccoons had gotten in. 2 days later, he found the crawl space door cracked open. He assumed he forgot to latch it. He hadn't. Someone had been coming onto the property before I ever arrived. Someone had been under the house. Someone had set up cameras. Someone learned my name. And someone waited until my grandparents left. The prepaid phone they found under the house had only one saved contact, but it wasn't a name, just a number. Police said it was probably used to text me from nearby. The message I received came from that phone. They never found the man. His footprints led from the crawl space across the yard, through the barn and out toward the woods. From there, the ground was too dry to track. My grandparents sold the house the next year. They said it was because the property was too much work as they got older, but I think we all knew the real reason. After that night, the house didn't feel like theirs anymore. It felt like someone else had known it better than we did. I don't sit in the country now. I don't care how quiet the road is, how friendly the neighbors are, or how safe someone says the area feels. Because quiet doesn't always mean peaceful. Sometimes it just means whoever is nearby knows how to move without being heard. And every time I see a floor vent in an old house, I think about those fingers pushing through. Not from outside. From underneath. Now the last story takes us somewhere completely different. No frozen woods. No farmhouse with a crawl space underneath it. This one happened in a place full of noise. People everywhere. Music through walls. Cars packed into beach. Town parking lots. The kind of place where you think nothing truly bad can happen because there are too many witnesses. But sometimes a crowd doesn't make you safer. Sometimes it just gives the wrong person more places to hide. My name is Evan Mercer. I was 22 when this happened, and it was during spring break in Panama City Beach. I went with 4 friends from college. Chris, Lauren, Mia, and Daniel. We rented a cheap condo 3 blocks from the beach because it was the only place we could afford. The listing made it look nicer than it was. In the photos, it had clean white walls, a bright balcony, and a view of the water if you leaned far enough to the left. In person, the building was older, with chipped paint on the railings, outdoor walkways, sticky elevator buttons, and a pool that always had sand at the bottom. But we were 22. None of that mattered. We were near the beach, and that was enough. The first day was exactly what you'd expect. We walked around, got sunburned, spent too much money on food, and came back late. People were yelling from balconies. Music played from every direction. Someone down the hall kept dropping something heavy against the wall, and nobody cared because every unit was loud. The first weird thing happened the next morning. There was a blue towel hanging over our balcony railing. White stripes, cheap beach towel, still damp. None of us owned it. I asked Chris if it was his. He said no. Lauren thought maybe it had blown down from the unit above us. That made sense, so I took it off the railing and tossed it onto one of the balcony chairs. We forgot about it. That night we went out again. Nothing crazy. Just food, drinks, walking along the strip, laughing at people who were more drunk than us. When we got back around 2 in the morning, the towel was hanging on the railing again. Same spot. Folded neatly this time. That got everyone's attention. Daniel said, "Okay, that's weird." I looked up at the balcony above us, but it was dark. No one looking over. No movement. We checked the sliding balcony door. Locked. At least, we thought it was. The lock was one of those old sliding latches that looked secure, but felt loose when you touched it. I pulled the door hard, and it didn't open, so we told ourselves it was fine. The next morning, Lauren found sand in her bed. Not just a few grains. A line of it. Across her sheets near the pillow. She thought we did it. We didn't. Then Mia noticed her makeup bag had been moved from the bathroom counter to the top drawer. Nothing was missing. That made it feel even stranger. If someone had broken in and stolen something, we would have known what to think. But moving things. Leaving sand. Folding a towel. It felt childish and creepy at the same time. We called the property management number from the booking app. A woman answered and sounded like she had already dealt with too many spring breakers that week. She told us maintenance would check the balcony lock the next day. We asked if there had been any complaints or break-ins. She said, "Not that I know of." But she said it too fast. That night before we left, I checked the balcony door twice. I put a dining chair behind it too, angled under the handle as best I could. Chris laughed and called me paranoid. But he still checked the front door before we left. We came back earlier that night around 1. The chair was moved. Not knocked over. Moved. It was sitting about 2 feet away from the balcony door, facing the living room. Everyone stopped when they saw it. The balcony door was cracked open about an inch. The blue towel was gone. Nobody said anything for a second. Then Chris grabbed a kitchen knife, and Daniel grabbed a lamp like that was going to do anything. We turned on every light and searched the condo. Closets. Bathroom. Under beds. Behind curtains. The tiny laundry room. Nobody was there. Nothing seemed stolen. Then Lauren opened her suitcase. All her clothes had been folded. Every shirt. Every pair of shorts. Everything arranged neatly inside. She sat down on the bed and started crying. Mia wanted to leave immediately. Daniel said we should get another hotel. Chris argued that every place would be booked or overpriced, and we had already paid for the condo. I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to leave too. But another part kept trying to explain it away. Maybe housekeeping came by accidentally. Maybe maintenance checked the door while we were gone. Maybe the chair got moved when they came in. But that didn't explain the clothes. Or the towel. Or the sand. We called property management again. Nobody answered this time. So we called the non-emergency police line. They sent an officer about 40 minutes later. He looked tired before he even walked in. He checked the balcony door, looked at the chair, asked if anything was stolen, and told us to keep the door blocked and call again if someone tried to enter. I remember feeling angry after he left. Not because he was rude, he wasn't, but because I could tell he thought we were drunk college kids scaring ourselves. Around 4 in the morning, I woke up on the couch to a scraping sound. At first, I thought someone was dragging a chair upstairs. Then I realized the sound was coming from the balcony. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. I opened my eyes. The room was dark except for the microwave clock. 4:07. The balcony curtains were closed. Then the handle moved. Down. Up. Down again. Someone was trying the door. I sat up slowly and whispered, "Chris." He didn't wake up. The handle moved again. Then stopped. A phone flashlight clicked on outside the glass door. The light shone through the gap between the curtains and moved slowly across the room. Left to right. Right to left. Like someone was looking inside. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I looked down. AirDrop. A photo request from someone named Beach Guy. I should not have accepted it. I know that. But I was half awake and terrified, and my brain reacted before I thought it through. The photo opened. It was us sleeping. All 5 of us. The picture had been taken from inside the condo, facing the living room and bedroom hallway. I yelled so loud everyone woke up at once. The flashlight outside vanished. Chris ran to the balcony door and ripped the curtains open. Nobody was there. But the blue towel was back, folded on the balcony chair. On top of it was our spare key card, the one we had left in the kitchen drawer. That's when everyone stopped arguing. We called 911. Police came back, and this time they took it seriously. They checked the balcony and found scrape marks along the outside railing. Then, one officer leaned over and shined his flashlight down. There was a narrow maintenance walkway below our floor. We hadn't noticed it before, because it sat lower than the balcony ledge and wrapped around the side of the building toward a locked utility stairwell. The lock on that stairwell door had been taped so it wouldn't latch. Inside, police found beer cans, cigarette butts, a phone charger, and a small black backpack. In the backpack were 3 key cards, a roll of tape, a screwdriver, and a folded piece of paper with room numbers written on it. Ours was circled. So were 4 others. One officer asked about the blue towel, and when we told him, his face changed. He said, "Do you still have it?" It was on the chair. He picked it up with gloves. There was black marker written on one corner. Our room number. Police later told us they arrested a man 2 buildings over after someone reported him trying to open a balcony door. He wasn't staying at our condo. He wasn't a guest anywhere nearby. He had been hanging around spring break rentals for days, watching groups come and go. He figured out which units were rented by people who stayed out late, drank too much, and didn't notice small things moving around. The towel was how he marked rooms. Hanging meant he had found a way in. Folded meant he planned to come back. On his phone, police found pictures from several units. People sleeping. Suitcases open. Girls sitting on beds with the balcony door behind them unlocked. One photo showed Lauren asleep in our condo the first night. The camera angle was from the bedroom doorway. That meant he had stood inside our rental while we slept. We left the next morning. Nobody cared about the money anymore. The drive home was quiet. Weeks later, I found out something that still makes my stomach turn. The property manager admitted that several guests had complained about towels appearing on balconies earlier that week. He thought it was drunk people messing around and didn't report it. One couple had even said their balcony door was open when they returned from dinner. Nothing was stolen, so nobody treated it like a break-in. That was the point. He wasn't stealing things. He was learning rooms, learning schedules, learning who slept where. And for us, he had been confident enough to come back more than once. That's what scares me most. Not that someone broke into a crowded spring break rental, but that he did it surrounded by people. Music playing, cars passing, security guards walking around, groups coming home at all hours. And none of it stopped him. Because noise can hide things too. It can hide footsteps. It can hide a balcony door sliding open. It can hide someone standing in the room while everyone sleeps. I still go on trips now, but I check every balcony door. I block sliding doors with a bar or chair. I never ignore something that appears where it shouldn't be. Not a towel. Not a key card. Not a chair moved 2 feet from where I left it. Because sometimes the first sign isn't the danger. Sometimes it's just the marker someone leaves behind so they can find you again. So here's my question. If you were staying somewhere on vacation and found something on your balcony that no one in your group owned, would you laugh it off? Or would you leave before finding out who put it there?